I've been watching a lot of videos on YouTube recently where people open their Ancestry DNA results and talk about them. And these videos have thousands and thousands of views. And I realized, well, I have Ancestry DNA results. Perhaps if I were to share them, I would get thousands of views. And perhaps my feeling that no one would care about my ancestry is just low self-esteem. So I'm going to talk about my ancestry. We do have elaborate charts that my cousin created about the ancestry on my mother's side. It can be traced back to Elder Brewster on the Mayflower and Jedediah Huntington, a brigadier general at Valley Forge. And just a lot of that old New England waspy stuff. And then I know that my father came here essentially as a refugee on a student visa in 1937 to go to Princeton as a person of Jewish ancestry who was trying to escape from the Holocaust. Now, he was a person of Jewish ancestry, but he was not Jewish. He was raised Lutheran, and his parents professed Christianity as adults. So I really expected to see half British, half Jewish. That's what I really expected to see. And that is mostly what I saw. And I can't really pretend to be surprised because I opened this stuff a while back. And a lot of these videos, the people are trying to create a show by being surprised. So I can't do that part. But who knows? Maybe you'll like it anyway. So this was the first estimate that Ancestry DNA sent me. Now you can see I wasn't taking this very seriously at the time. I just retained the text. I didn't get the full map experience, mostly because I have Google Maps and I sort of figured like I knew where these places were already. Now you'll notice they said I was 46% Jewish. And then I was 3% Swedish. Now that was totally unexpected. And I thought, well, what does this mean? I guess it means that some of my ancestors were raped by Vikings. Maybe the Jewish ancestors, maybe the English ancestors, maybe both. And I think this is important because, you know, when I watch some of the young African Americans looking at their ancestry, they are concerned about the fact that they're 20% white, and that probably, though not necessarily, means that some of their ancestors were rapists. But I think that's not so uncommon. I think most of us, if we would look at our ancestry, we would find that some of our ancestors were rapists. And then there was England and Northwest Europe, 45%. I see I failed to space here. And that was exactly what I expected. And then there was Ireland and Scotland, 6%. That didn't really surprise me. After all, those are the British Isles as well. Now, I should say that I didn't find any unexpected close relatives. That was a little disappointing to me. I don't have very many relatives on my father's side, and I kind of hoped I would find someone that had survived the Holocaust. There are some first cousins that I know about that are here in the United States. My father's first cousins and descendants of them, and those are my second and third cousins. But I don't have anyone that I know about on my father's mother's side. And I hoped maybe I would find someone, but I didn't, at least not in this search, and that was sad. Now, some people have told me I should go and get tested in a different database because maybe I would find relatives. But it kind of looks like nobody from my father's mother's family survived. Now, then, in October 2019, I got new estimates. And you can see that I was a little more interested at this point because I did take a screenshot of the maps. And, my ancestors were all from Europe, except that section in New England was showing that they immigrated a long time ago to New England, which I expected. But what was interesting to me is this estimate said I was 50% Jewish. And Sweden was still down there 2%, so I said, okay. It wasn't my dad's ancestors that were raped by Vikings. It was my mom's ancestors. That makes sense. I mean, England was invaded by Vikings. That makes sense. And Ireland and Scotland are getting a little more prominent, and England is getting less prominent. And that was all a little strange because I really thought, and there's apparently my mother had some Germanic too. So I really thought that she was all British, but apparently not. So this is probably how I should have done the other videos. Cell phone on a tripod, better lighting, less reflections on my glasses, less background noise. This is how I should have done it. Am I going to go back and redo the other parts? Oh, probably not. We'll see. Anyway, there was a story I wanted to tell you. My grandparents escaped from the Holocaust on visas forged by my grandfather's secretary. Her name was Helena Jacobs, and she was honored later by the government of Israel for her activities in resisting the Holocaust. She actually helped thousands of people escape. And eventually she was arrested and put in prison. And then this part of the story sounded very strange to me, but this is what my father told me. They had a shortage of skilled administrative personnel during World War II, and my grandfather's secretary was a very skilled administrator. So they made her an administrator of the prison where she was imprisoned. And she continued her Holocaust resistance activities there. And after the war, when she was asked why she risked her life and her freedom, she said it was because my grandfather was so wonderful. That's a little hard for me to believe. When I knew him, he was an old, cranky, irascible guy. But who knows, maybe when he was younger, he was wonderful. But my dad speculated that possibly his father had had an affair with his secretary. So I had this fantasy that maybe there was a half-sibling of my father out there somewhere. Maybe. But he didn't find anything like that yet. So then in October of 2020, they sent me yet another estimate. And well, this just goes to show that genetics is hardly an advanced science, and they have a long way to go. And perhaps sometime during 2020, I contacted them to volunteer to use my DNA for COVID-related experiments or something. And I heard back that they weren't going to do that, that for whatever reason, my DNA was not interesting for that purpose. But perhaps it made them wake up and look at my results again. And you'll see that I'm back to being 46% Jewish rather than 50% Jewish. And Sweden is back up to 3%. And again, I wasn't interested enough to try to figure out how to get the map images. I think my subscription has expired by now, and I'm not really authorized to go back in there. Maybe I am. I don't know. In any case, so now I go back to thinking, well, okay, so maybe it was my dad's ancestors who were raped by Vikings, and also some non-Jewish Germans. And the England and Northwest Europe, 39%. So my mom is seeming not that English as I expected. And Ireland was up to 10%. And now that's really surprising to me. So when I go back to my cousin, who's the genealogist, he said, well, there's a 3 greats grandmother who was Irish. But that's not enough to come up to 10%. And so, even though I don't think there were Irish people in that chart that he has with 4,000 ancestors, 4,400 ancestors, I don't think there were a lot of Irish people in there. Perhaps there was someone, who was fooling around on the side. We don't think about that. It was such a religious, puritanical family. But, people do. So, the Irish is a little surprising. But, who knows? Ancestry DNA may revise that again. So there's kind of an irony here, right? I mean, on the one hand, that my mother's family, they had a lot of clergy people. My great-grandmother, my mother's mother's mother, she was born in China, the daughter of missionaries. And they had that tracing their ancestry back to Elder Brewster. And there was that whole New England WASP, pilgrim, puritanical ethos, And maybe one of those puritanical, waspy people was fiddling around with an Irishman. And on the other hand, there was my dad, who was fantasizing that his father had this great sex life with an affair with his secretary, and maybe he didn't. So, it remains to be seen how this fares. That little bad self-esteem part of me says, nobody's gonna watch my video. I'm not young, I'm not pretty, I'm not peppy, I don't have a nice smile all the time, and moreover, I am recording this as a rainy day project, and there's a lot of water and traffic noise as the cars go by on the wet streets, and people are not going to enjoy this. However, I do think that the observations that I made might be of interest to some people if they listen. I probably spent too much time looking at printouts and not enough time looking at my face. Probably most people don't like to look at printouts and listen to voiceover. I don't know. Maybe I should redo this and be peppier. Maybe I should redo it under better circumstances where there's less background noise. Anyway, here we go.